Boxy. We're live. Hi, I'm Larry Harnish, and this is Boxy. Boxy is the Los Angeles County District Attorney's files in the Black Dahlia case. And this is the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case for July 2025. I'm having a bit of a technical problem over on YouTube, which is over here. The live chat is currently unavailable, so I will not be able to take questions on YouTube. So Black Dahlia Files, I don't know how to add you to my live video, so I can't do that. Okay. Anyway, this is the monthly Ask Me Anything that I do on the Black Dahlia case. I started doing these a while ago. I got fed up with the increasingly bad quality of the true crime genre. Just to back up a little bit and introduce me, Larry Harnish, 34 years in journalism, 27 at the LA Times. I've been researching the Black Dahlia case since 1996. I began to write a story for the 50th anniversary of the Black Dahlia case that was published in January of 1997. So I've been researching it for a long time. And I used to consider it my obligation to talk to anybody with a microphone and a camera to set the record straight. But I realized a few years ago, people don't want the record straight on the Black Dahlia case. They do not want that. They want some folklore, they just want a regurgitation of the same old stuff. And I just quit. I do the Ask Me Anything instead. I'm a lot happier. Again, YouTube, I can see that people are here. The chat is unavailable. I don't know why. I can't help you with that. Sorry. But anyway, so the way this works is I talk for a while, and then normally I would open it up to questions, but I can't do that in the live chat. I have some submitted questions, so I'll be doing a lot of talking, but that's how it works. Again, I do the Black Dahlia case first Tuesday of the month. So that is today, and then the next one will be August 5th. In a couple of weeks, I will do an Ask Me Anything on George Hodel and Steve Hodel. That will be July 15th, 2 weeks from today. Also at 10 a.m. on you Instagram and you YouTube. And I will be doing that. And let me point out, it is Ask Me Anything. It is not Tell Me Anything. And it is not Ask Me Anything about Larry Harnish. No, don't do that. Ask me anything about the Black Dahlia case or George Hodel and Steve Hodel. But my personal life is out of it. Anyway, the way this normally works is I will give you a report on the book. I am writing a book about the Black Dahlia case. It's long, it's complicated. You may hear, oh, well, Harnish has writer's block. Harnish has given up, yada, yada, yada. Right now, I am at 177,000 words. And let me point out, you don't get to 177,000 words by playing computer solitaire. No. I have finished part 1 of the book. That is The Life of Elizabeth Short. I need to go back and finish up one chapter that deals with Virginia Short and Adrian West. And I need to go back and take care of that. And I've been more interested in pushing ahead. I am now on part 2 of the book, which is the investigation. So I have dealt with the crime scene. I have dealt with the autopsy. And at this point, I am going to do kind of an analysis of the crime scene and the autopsy. But I need to handle that in a way so that the narrative doesn't bog down. Because there is a narrative, there is storytelling going on. Frederick Newbar has finished the autopsy. And so I begin the chapter with what's happening at the Examiner, what's happening with the different newspapers, and then kind of this analysis. And it's a tricky part. The organization of the analysis of the autopsy and the crime scene is it's tricky organizationally because so much was done to Elizabeth Short. A lot was done to her. Trigger warning. I'm not going to get into everything that was done to her, but it was a lot. And so to organize that in some sort of cogent fashion is tricky. And I was fortunate to, and I've talked to a lot of people, either criminalists or the original investigators, what they said about the case, some medical people. And I recently was fortunate to talk to a retired pathologist about Elizabeth Short's autopsy in some depth. And it was very interesting. He had a lot of interesting things to say. Some insights were obvious and made sense, and other things were like, oh, really? And remember, I'm a layperson. Okay, I have no medical background. So this is just stuff that I go, oh, really? Well, that's interesting. So that's kind of where I am with the book. But again, you don't get to 177,000 words by playing computer solitaire. So that's kind of an update on the book. Now, I moderate very heavily my comments. I have been dealing with the true crime community for a long, long time, and I am well acquainted with the true crime trolls. I really am. Most of the comments are moderated. Most people never see them because I have to approve them. But it's really interesting, the comments that people never ever see. And what's amusing is the internet sleuths that speak with the voice of God. How can you say this? How can you say that? Of course this, of course that. And really, there aren't many questions. It's all kind of a, as I said, it's not a tell me anything. So I get that. But I want to address some of the things that come in. This is one comment. It was just to be clear. You're saying that everyone that's written about this crime, even Aggie Underwood, is either a liar or has a bad memory. Everyone except you. In short, this would be a proper assessment. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And let's roll back. I have some visual aids here. Okay, what book is this? This is Newspaperwoman. Okay, by Aggie Underwood, or is it? Oh, no, it's not by Aggie Underwood. This deals with it talks about the Black Dahlia case in here, but spoiler alert, Aggie Underwood did not write this book. Even though it has her name on it, it's written by a guy named Foster Goss, who was the ghostwriter. So this was actually written by a guy named Foster Goss, and Aggie Underwood put her name on it, which is not exactly a truthful thing. You have to admit, it's not exactly a truthful thing to put your name on a book you didn't write. But what's important about that, what's significant about that, is the treatment of the Black Dahlia case in this book, where the book talks about the crime scene. Okay, the description is all screwed up because it's not what she saw, it's what Foster Goss kind of imagined that she saw. Okay, that's screwed up. And then there's a lot of misconceptions about Aggie Underwood was pulled off the case. She was getting too close. And it's like, if you do a little digging beyond what's in here, you'll find a much different explanation. And I'm not going to get into all of that, but in the sense that she didn't write it, it's not exactly truthful. Okay, so that's one book. Next we have Reporters by Will Fowler. Okay, Will Fowler is the founder of the grand tradition of lying about the Black Dahlia case. Many, many, many lies by Will Fowler. And I will point out that when I interviewed Will Fowler in 1996, he lied to me. What were his lies? Okay, trigger warning. He would say that Elizabeth Short had infantile genitalia. That's a lie. As a matter of fact, he actually wrote a letter to Mary Pacios, who we'll get to in a minute, saying, oh, yeah, that was a lie. I just said that to fool other writers. He would deliberately switch details around, and I'm not going to get into what it is, with the autopsy of Elizabeth Short. He said he was the first reporter he was the first person on the crime scene, and the police showed up and pulled their guns. No, that didn't happen either. None of that happened. So Will Fowler is really the founder of the grand tradition of lying about the Black Dahlia case. Okay, so that's Will Fowler and Aggie Underwood. Yes. And I'm going to leave out Jack Webb's The Badge. I have a copy of it, but I didn't feel like dragging it out. Jack Webb's The Badge is also not truthful. It's written from Jack Webb's particular, and he wrote he wrote the entire book in this sort of weird downbeat fashion, and it really is a very downbeat. Elizabeth Short is this loser. She is this drifter, no count, and it's only because she got busted that she didn't go into an anonymous grave, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's not real accurate either. People assume that because Jack Webb was involved with Dragnet, that he somehow had a pipeline to the LAPD. It isn't really, but the entire book, all of The Badge, is very dubious. You really have to watch out for it. Okay, but I don't have that here. Next. Oh, this is a ripe one. This is Severed. Okay, let's back up a minute. Remember reporters? Will Fowler? Okay, here's Will Fowler at the crime scene, at the Black Dahlia crime scene. Can you see that? Will Fowler at the Black Dahlia crime scene. That's what that picture is. Okay. Along come John Gilmore and Mary Pacios. Okay. They are working on a Black Dahlia book together. Oh, yes, they were. And in the course of researching what would become Severed, they interviewed Will Fowler. And Will Fowler told them the story about Elizabeth Short's infantile genitalia and all this other stuff. And it's all in here. Mary Pacios and John Gilmore eventually had a falling out. But at that time, they were collaborating on a book. And the material that's in Severed, that's all made up. Okay. Severed is 25% mistakes and 50% fiction. That's spread to all kinds of other books. Significantly, in terms of the autopsy, Will Fowler's, trigger warning, Will Fowler's claim about Elizabeth Short's infantile genitalia. Okay, that's in here, but it's and because I haven't read Severed for a long time, that becomes, God, what does he say? She didn't have a completed vaginal canal. What? That doesn't make any sense. And I'm not going to get into a real detailed debunking of the autopsy of Elizabeth Short in here, but it is painfully inept. It is painfully inaccurate. It's just, oh my God, what is he saying? But Will Fowler's switch of certain details about Elizabeth Short's body, they're in here. The other thing that John Gilmore invented was that Elizabeth Short was forced to eat feces. And that's all over the place. Okay. And I should point out John Gilmore's technique for lying, because he had a technique for that. What he would do, Gilmore would introduce actual people. He would talk about Harry Hansen, Phineas Brown, Phineas Brown, whatever you want to call him. He would talk about those guys. And he would talk about Jack Donahoe, head of homicide. But he never interviewed them. He would say, I interviewed this detective who was loaned to the investigation, Herman Willis. And Herman Willis was at the autopsy. Sounds reasonable, right? Okay. I have Boxy. Boxy tells me exactly who was at the autopsy of Elizabeth Short. And you know who wasn't there? Herman Willis. So no, John Gilmore made up Herman Willis. And he made up a morgue assistant, Louis Delgado. Those are fictional people. And so John Gilmore's technique for lying is he will talk about real people, and then he will invent somebody who was his source. And he does that again and again. That is his technique for lying. But anyway, Severed. Severed is 25% mistakes and 50% fiction. So are they lying? Yes, they are. But what is significant about Severed? Because the material goes from Will Fowler, right, to John Gilmore, to, yes, Black Dahlia Avenger. Steve Hodel just picks up John Gilmore's lies. Some of them. He does, yes. He picks up John Gilmore's lies of Elizabeth Short was forced to eat feces. Oh, he loves that. Steve Hodel loves the story that Elizabeth Short was forced to eat feces, which John Gilmore invented. And he sort in this book, he picks up Will Fowler's switch of the details. He falls for that in here, but by the time he gets to Most Evil, he's got it right, I think. Or at least he's figured it out that Will Fowler was lying. The significance of Most Evil is that, and I'm not going to get into debunking Hodel. I have a whole separate. This is where he gets into Elizabeth Short was the method used to cut Elizabeth Short in half was a hemicorporectomy. No, it wasn't. The hemicorporectomy didn't exist in 1947. Okay. Which brings us to the Black Dahlia Files. This too is all lies by Don Wolfe. What Don Wolfe did was he got some of Boxy here, and then it wasn't good enough, so he faked the document. He pasted together a couple of things. So no, and I did a whole blog about the Black Dahlia Files and Don Wolfe. So yeah, those books are all lies. Piu Eatwell's book, which I don't have, that deliberately misstates what happened to Leslie Dillon. Leslie Dillon was in San Francisco when Elizabeth Short was killed. He didn't do it at all. And then Eli Frankel's book on Sisters in Death. And what's deceptive about that is, well, his guy, Carl Balsiger, was stationed in Washington in the Army when the first murder, Lila Welch, was committed. How do I know that? I have his personnel records. You know, I got him years ago from the what is it? The National Personnel Records Division or department. I forget what it's called, but anyway, yeah, I have his Army records. I know where he was stationed. He wasn't there. He didn't do it. The only books that are not deceitful, meaning that they are deliberately lying, okay, would be what? Daddy was the Black Dahlia killer. And that is because Janice Knowlton, who was crazy, and I mean, she was bonkers crazy, she was not trying to be deceptive. Her portion of the book, she really believed what she said. It wasn't true at all, but yeah, she did believe it. It was not concocted as a fraud. That's the difference. And I think Michael Newton, the co-author, I think he was trying to do a competent job with Janice Knowlton. I don't sense any deliberate deception on his part. I haven't read the book in a long time, but I don't think so. So that would be one that even though it's not reliable, there's no deliberate fraud and deception involved in it. The other book would be Childhood Shadows by Mary Pacios. There is no deliberate deception in there as far as I know. I will say that some of the things Mary Pacios says, and I consider Mary a friend. I like Mary, but some of the things she says are just flat out impossible. That could not have happened. An example would be where she said, and she told me this story. I was having lunch with her at a restaurant, and she started telling me this story which was that the way she found out Elizabeth Short had been killed is that she was babysitting and she was watching television, and the TV news came on and announced that Elizabeth Short had been killed. Well, no, that didn't happen. That's not possible. We're talking 1947, which is not even the infancy of television. There were TV stations in New York. There were some TV stations in Los Angeles that were experimental, but nightly news on television? No, that's just not possible. It is just, and when she told me this story, and I was sitting having lunch with her, it's like, what are you saying? That isn't possible. That couldn't have happened. But she believes it. So with Childhood Shadows and Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer, there's no deliberate deception involved. They believe what they say. And I think to some point now, Steve Hodel has talked himself into believing what he says. Doesn't make it true. But I think the original, like the foundation of Black Dahlia Avenger is a scam. He might believe it now. Anyway, so yes, pretty much everybody who has written a book about the Black Dahlia case has been lying. Yes. Now, speaking of lying, and I see that live chat is still not available. Sorry, YouTubers. I don't know what to tell you. I got a question. Why do you think Peter Vetcher is a liar? Oh, we're going to go deep on Peter Vetcher. His FBI statement seems straightforward. He obviously met her, but why would he lie about other stuff? Okay. Who is Peter Vetcher? Oh, we're going to go into the Black Dahlia FBI file, which I happen to have. Now, you can, this is an early copy that was redacted of the, can you see that, of the FBI file? Okay. There are two versions of the FBI file. There was a heavily redacted version of the FBI file, and then somebody went back and unredacted a bunch of stuff. So you can download it from the FBI has a reading room. It's a gosh, I think it's foia.fbi.gov, something like that. But yeah, don't buy it on eBay. There are people who will sell the FBI file on eBay. Don't waste your money. You can download it for free. But here's the thing about the FBI file. Before I get into talking about Peter Vetcher, if you don't know the Black Dahlia case in a lot of detail, if you don't have a really good handle already on the Black Dahlia case, you will get hopelessly lost in the FBI file. You really will. Okay. Why? With the FBI file, people go, ooh, the FBI. Okay. The FBI had a very, very small role in the Black Dahlia case. What did they do? They identified Elizabeth Short from her fingerprints. They did that. The LAPD sent bristles that were, whoever killed Elizabeth Short scrubbed her body with a brush. And so they recovered bristles from this brush that were sent to the FBI crime lab because it was more sophisticated than what the LAPD had at the time. So the FBI did identify Elizabeth Short from her fingerprints. They did that. And they had, the crime lab did, the crime lab did analyze the bristle, which they found it's like, yeah, it's from an ordinary cocoa fiber brush. It's no big deal. Beyond that, there's a lot of behind the scenes of, which newspapers, which LA newspapers are friendly to the Bureau and which aren't. There's some of that. And then there's newspaper clippings. The FBI operated kind of a clipping service, and there are some Examiner clippings in there. And I think the FBI in general tended to clip the local papers. So there is that. Beyond that, what else the FBI did was they conducted interviews on behalf of the LAPD. Okay, that was pretty typical. The LAPD, instead of sending a couple of investigators to another city to interview somebody, they would ask the local FBI office, the local agent in charge, would you do an interview on our behalf? And we would like you to ask this, and this question. That was somewhat common. There's some material in the FBI file about a couple of men that Elizabeth Short knew in Chicago, but I don't think the actual transcripts are in the FBI file. There's kind of, well, so and so is reputable and so is not reputable, blah 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 blah. But in terms of an actual transcription of the interview, I don't think so. But Peter Vetcher, yes. Okay, who is Peter Vetcher and why do I say he's lying? Okay, I spent 6.5 weeks researching the life of this Peter Vetcher. That's one reason the book takes so long, is because you have to nail this down. In the early version of the FBI file, his name is redacted. You have no idea who this guy is. And so consequently, there was no way to track it down. In the more recent FBI file dump that you can download now from the FBI reading room, his name is there, Peter Vetcher. And so I spent about 6 weeks just researching his life as best I could at that time. And yes, the guy was just a pathological liar. Okay, how does this Peter Vetcher guy hook up with Elizabeth Short at all? Okay, this is at the point in Elizabeth Short's life in Los Angeles where she had come up to Hollywood with Gordon Fickling. Gordon Fickling exits. Elizabeth Short runs into one of her waitressing pals from Massachusetts, a woman named Margie Graham. Margie Graham says, hey, I'm out here in Los Angeles. I'm working as a waitress, and I've got a room with a woman named, and you'll recognize the name, Lynn Martin. Okay, Lynn Martin wasn't her real name. She used a lot of aliases, but we will call her Lynn Martin. And Lynn Martin shows up in Elroy's novel, The Black Dahlia. So you have these three young women, Elizabeth Short, Margie Graham, and Lynn Martin, and they're living at the Hawthorne Hotel, which is just a couple of blocks from Grauman's Chinese Theater on Orange. It's gone now. It's been torn down. Anyway, it's a couple of blocks south of Grauman's Chinese Theater, south of Hollywood Boulevard. Okay. Elizabeth Short and Margie Graham and Lynn Martin get thrown out of the Hawthorne. They're asked to leave. We don't know why. They get asked to leave. Okay. Lynn Martin goes off on her own. Exit stage right. Okay. And you have Elizabeth Short and Margie Graham. They end up in downtown Los Angeles at the Hotel Figueroa. And therefore they're there for maybe 5 days, a week, something like that. Very brief. So brief that it isn't really in, I don't think it's in the movements of Elizabeth Short, but yeah, they lived at the Hotel Figueroa for about a week. And one day, I am getting to the Peter Vetcher story. One day, Margie Graham and Elizabeth Short, according to Vetcher's story, is they were walking along Pershing Square. Vetcher happened to be in town. And Elizabeth Short noticed that he had a Ranger patch on his shoulder. And she said, oh, were you in the Rangers? He says, yes, I'm in the Rangers. Yes. And so she said, do you know, and I forget the guy's name, it's in my notes, so-and-so from my little home from Medford, who was also in the Rangers. And of course, Vetcher is no dummy. He says, oh, yes, I know him, but not well. Good answer. So what happens as far as we can verify is this. Margie Graham and Elizabeth Short and Vetcher walk down to the Hotel Figueroa. And there is a drugstore across the street where they buy a couple of postcards that they write to this guy that Elizabeth Short knew who lived in Medford. Okay. They write postcards to him that they are married. Elizabeth Short said, "Hi, I married Peter Vetcher," and she signs it, Betty Short Vetcher or something like that. And then Peter Vetcher writes this postcard, "Yeah, we're married, blah, 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 blah." So they send these two postcards to this guy in Medford. Well, when Elizabeth Short is killed and identified, then this guy in Medford, again, sorry, I can't remember his name, he notifies the LAPD and says, "Hey, I have these postcards that they were married." So the LAPD is not going to send somebody back east to interview Peter Vetcher. So they have the FBI do it. Okay. And what he tells the FBI is that, yeah, I picked up Elizabeth Short and I asked her for a date, and we went to see a radio show, and then we went to a dinner. We went to dinner at Tom Brenneman's, which is really, Tom Brenneman's was not the hot spot that he says it is. That was mainly Tom Brenneman had a radio show, but it was like breakfast with the sweet little old ladies. That was kind of the Tom Brenneman vibe. It was not a swinging nightclub at all. Anyway, he said, "Yeah, we went to this." They went to a radio show because Elizabeth Short liked to do that. They went to a radio show, and then they went to Tom Brenneman's, and then it was closing time, so they left. And oh yeah, I forgot. There's another. His buddy was there, and they all left. And then, oh wait a minute, Margie Graham had, coincidentally, he's got to get Margie Graham out of the picture. So Margie Graham has an all-night babysitting job somewhere in Hollywood. Okay. So he and Elizabeth Short go alone back to the Hotel Figueroa. He had asked, where can I get a room to stay? Well, there's no place to stay, so he can spend the night in their hotel room, supposedly. So long story short, they go back there. She's threatened by a carload of Mexicans, and he, being the tough ranger, he threatens to beat them all up. And she says, "Well, I'm going to go up to the room. You wait 20 minutes and then you come up." Okay. So he does that. And then they get in bed, and he has sex with her a bunch of times, and she's not at all passionate, and so he decides she's a lesbian. Okay, dude. And then it's the next morning, and Margie shows up, and they all go do whatever, and they go to a beer garden and get drunk, and blah 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 blah. Anyway, and I'm leaving out a couple of things. Why is Vetcher in town at all? Well, he and his sidekick are going around the country picking up soldiers who were AWOL. And he says, "Well, I just arranged leave, a weekend leave off the books." I was like, no, that didn't happen. No, that's already problematic. And then when you look at the timeline, and I forget, pardon me, but I don't want to get it wrong. I forget the name of the radio show that I supposedly attended, but the radio, his timeline doesn't work out. The radio show was done live at a much earlier, because it was out in LA and relayed to the rest of the country. So his timeline for going to the radio show doesn't work out. So it's like, this just doesn't quite add up. So I spent 6 weeks researching the life of Peter Vetcher. He was in the Rangers. That's true. He was in a different unit than he said he was, but yes, he was in the Rangers. He was captured during World War II. He was in a POW camp. That is true. But much later in his life, because he was a career Army guy, he stayed in. And in his later years, he would give interviews about his illustrious World War II exploits. He would say, "Yeah, I escaped from this prison camp, and I hiked all the way across Germany as a POW. Okay. And I witnessed the Soviets and the Allies meeting. I witnessed all of that. And then I worked as a translator because of my knowledge of languages. And it's like, this isn't, this just isn't adding up. None of this is true. And so the bottom line is the guy was just and when the reporter, and most of the reporters were much younger guys who didn't want to challenge the old soldier too much, but when they did challenge him, he'd say, "Oh, well, that's classified information." So it's like, yeah, okay, dude, sure. So yeah, it's totally made up. That didn't stop some French artists from doing a graphic novel based on his account that's in the FBI file, but it's total BS. Why would he lie about that? People lie, as I demonstrated by all these books. People lie. They just do. People lie about the Black Dahlia case. They just make stuff up. So yeah, I've got a question on Instagram. Thank you, YouTubers. I am sorry that the chat is unavailable. I don't know what to do about that. I checked the little box to make chat okay. It's supposed to be okay. I don't know. But the question is, have you read the 1947 Police Gazette article on the Black Dahlia case? If so, what do you think? Yes, I have read it. I have a copy of the Police Gazette article. I read it so long. I bought it on eBay. I don't remember what I paid for it. It was so long ago. I read it. And I have to be honest with you, I don't remember anything about it except that I have a copy, and it's got this funny. I mean, the Police Gazette. In case you don't know, the Police Gazette was an early pulpy magazine in the 40s, and it's the kind of thing you would have in the barber shop, okay, in those days. And yes, I am old enough to remember that. You'd go into the local the corner barber shop, and there would be, the Police Gazette, and you would read the local Police Gazette. So I mean, it's all of those pulpy detective magazines, whether you're talking about Police Gazette or True Detective or any of those others, they just rehash the newspaper clips. That's all they do. And whether there's any accuracy to it depends on the caliber of the writer and their ability to rehash the news clips. I wouldn't put any great stock in any of them. I do have a better recollection of the True Detective article. It's quite long. And that's the one from October 48. And that is called The Black Dahlia Murders. And it tries to hook together all of these murders, the murder of Elizabeth Short and Jean French, and the whole litany of all these, unrelated murders of women, tries to smoosh them all together as the Black Dahlia Murders. But the Police Gazette, as I said, I have a copy. I haven't read it in years. I have no reason to read it, but I have it. Okay. So sorry, YouTubers. I really am. I'm going to go to the submitted questions here. Okay. Trigger warning. Was Beth raped or assaulted? Okay. What we have is from the autopsy. Frederick Newbar routinely checked all women homicide victims for traces of sperm, stomach, vagina, and anal tract. He routinely did that. No, he did not find any. He did not find any trace of sperm. No. So beyond that, that's all we have. That's all we know. That's all we have. Okay. Let's see. Oh, this is an interesting question here. Okay. And I don't know where this individual got their information. It was known that Elizabeth Short left LA at 4 a.m. Possibility she got on the wrong bus, fell asleep, woke up in San Diego instead of bus for Oakland. It's plausible. No, it isn't. No, that's not at all what happened. She did. First of all, I don't know where you got your information that she left LA at 4 a.m. She didn't. Here's what happened. Elizabeth Short had a cover story. she needed to get out of Hollywood for the holidays. Okay. So she came up with this story that said, well, I'm going up to visit my sister in the Bay Area, Virginia and Adrian West. That was all bullshit. She had no intention of doing that. Virginia and Adrian had no intent, did not expect to see her at all. It was a BS story from the get-go. Why she went to San Diego, her explanation was that she told Mark Hansen she saw a weirdo. I think it was saw a weirdo, something like that, and took the bus to San Diego. The reality is that a bus ticket to San Diego is a lot less. And I don't know how your knowledge of California geography is a little bit shaky. San Diego is south of Los Angeles and Oakland is north. So there's no way that you could just sleep through your stop and wake up in no, not at all. She deliberately went to San Diego. She got off the bus. She checked her luggage, and then she crashed in an all-night movie theater. And what's weird about it is that there were a number of all-night movie theaters in San Diego, and she went to the furthest one from the bus station. Why? I don't know. That's an Elizabeth Short question, but that's what she did. No, it's absolutely no. There's no way that happened. She deliberately going to San Diego was a deliberate choice. It wasn't an accident. She deliberately did it. Okay. Over here, let me scroll back. Is the case officially closed? No. With so many advancements in DNA extraction and testing, is there a possibility that DNA could link a family member of the offender through ancestry? The question was where would you get the DNA from? Because, and people get upset about this, the only thing that we know came from the killer was the little envelope addressed with cutout letters that contained her birth certificate and some business cards and snapshots and the so-called address book. That's the only thing that we know the killer handled. And everything in that envelope was doused with some kind of solvent. Sometimes it's called kerosene. It's described, but something that had it was some kind of solvent that had an odor. They tested for fingerprints on some of the pieces of cutout newspaper and stuff. And according to Harry Hansen, they got smudges and blurs. They didn't get anything usable. But the thing about DNA is you have to look at, because they weren't thinking about DNA in 1947. You have to look at all the people that handled that envelope, because it went through the postal system, and there's no telling how many people handled it. And in terms of the contents, that was all wiped with solvent. So it would be a crapshoot. And you think, well, maybe the stamp, maybe if the killer, licked the stamp, maybe, I don't know. But it would be a crapshoot. But the bottom line is, as far as the LAPD is concerned, they are only interested in cases that are going to result in an arrest and a conviction. That's all they care about. And it makes sense. Is the Black Dahlia case ever going to result in an arrest and a conviction? No, it isn't. So as far as they're concerned, it can just sit and molder in the file cabinets. Okay. Another one on, nope, go back. Oh, what are your thoughts about Officer Miller McBride's sighting of Elizabeth Short? Okay. What am I talking about here? There is a story in the newspapers, and Steve Hodel is just gung-ho on Officer Muriel McBride. And what's the story? This policewoman was assigned to, she was assigned somewhere on Main Street, okay, which was kind of a skid row in the 40s, which was not a place Elizabeth Short would hang out. And this young lady showed up, and, I have this abusive boyfriend, and I'm waiting for my daddy, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And Muriel McBride, Patrolwoman McBride, identified this lady as, oh, I had this encounter with Elizabeth Short, etc., etc. Okay. What nobody will tell you, no one tells you this, no one. That identification was based on a verbal description of Elizabeth Short. Oh, really? Yes. When Officer McBride was shown the iconic mugshot of Elizabeth Short's arrest in Santa Barbara, she went, oh, well, maybe not. She walked it back. No one tells you that. Everyone wants Merle McBride to have seen Elizabeth Short, you know, I'm waiting for my daddy, blah, blah, blah. No. It wasn't Elizabeth Short. When McBride saw her mugshot, she said, nah, probably not. She was less certain. I think I'll put it that way. She was less certain. But, it's a good story. And so people are gung-ho on it, especially, he loves the Merle McBride story. Hearts and flowers to Merle McBride from Steve Hodel. Okay. Couple more submitted questions here. Is it true that Matt Gordon committed suicide by plane? Yes. Evidence? I talked to his friends. I went to a reunion of his unit. I talked to all his fellow pilots. I interviewed them at length. And yes. So yeah, he committed suicide. Put it in the bank. Okay. I read once that a soldier or pilot commented about Elizabeth Short laughing inappropriately at him or one of his friends. Is this incident featured in the Black Dahlia FBI files? I have never heard that story. Never. I have never, ever heard that story. It's not in the FBI files. It's not in Boxy. I don't know what the source of that would be. I have never heard that. I have never heard any instance of Elizabeth Short laughing at anybody. That was not her mode. To the best of my knowledge, she didn't do that. She was very skilled in dealing with men. And no. I just don't know any basis of that at all. YouTubers, I'm sorry about the live chat. I'm sorry that there are no, I can't get any questions from you. I'm sorry. Okay. I have one more submitted question. So here we go. What can you tell us about this Dr. Patrick O'Reilly, whose name seems to keep popping up on the suspects list? Bogus or what? Okay. I did Patrick O'Reilly a while back. Okay. And so I'm kind of reluctant to get into it too much again, except that I can't get any questions from YouTube, so I'm going to have to. There is in Boxy here a list of what happened was this. Frank Jimison, District Attorney's Lieutenant Frank Jimison, who was investigating sort of the Black Dahlia case on behalf of the Los Angeles County Grand Jury. And why was he doing that? Because of the Leslie Dillon debacle, which I'm not going to get into. Basically, it was this bogus arrest that blew up in the LAPD's face, and the grand jury decided to investigate it, which they did. And most of what's in Boxy is related to the Leslie Dillon fiasco. But grand jury served for a year, and then they say goodbye. And so they passed the Black Dahlia investigation onto the next grand jury, which showed absolutely no interest in continuing it at all. And so Frank Jimison kind of peevishly wrote up a final list of suspects. Okay. And who was on that? George Hodel, Patrick O'Reilly, Carl Balsiger, all the people that show up in Black Dahlia suspects on Wikipedia, except for Jacob Edward Fisk. He's not on there. There will be Sergeant Chuck. There will be, queer woman surgeon. And Patrick O'Reilly is one of them. And the reason he gets dragged into the Black Dahlia case at all is because he had been accused of sexual abuse of his secretary. He was an osteopath, and so he had been accused of a sex crime, and they knew whoever bisected Elizabeth Short had advanced medical training. That came from the autopsy surgeon Frederick Newbar. Yeah, whoever cut her in half knew how to do it, and in their opinion, had advanced medical training. And so Patrick O'Reilly was someone with medical training. He was an osteopath who was accused of a sex crime. That's how George Hodel was on their radar. He had been accused of a sex crime, and even though he was found not guilty, he was investigated, and they put him under surveillance for 5.5 weeks and decided there's nothing there. Goodbye. He didn't flee the country ahead of the police. Nothing like that at all. They realized there is no there with George Hodel. Anyway, Patrick O'Reilly was one of the people they looked at. There's a whole little core of Patrick O'Reilly people. Like there's a whole little core of Mark Hansen people. Mark Hansen had to have done it. Patrick O'Reilly did it. Based on the idea that there are news stories about Patrick O'Reilly doing this amazing, super incredible, life-saving surgery. Okay. They don't dig any deeper than that. Where are those stories from? They're from a newspaper in San Francisco. Oh. Well, if this Los Angeles osteopath does this incredible, super duper, amazing surgery, why didn't any of the LA papers write it up? Well, they kind of did. It's in one of the Hearst papers. And what happened was the Hearst paper got a hold of it. The Hearst paper in San Francisco got a hold of it and blew it up into major proportions. But ask yourself, okay, what is the source of the story? And it involved, I think, a singer who has some kind of health problem, and O'Reilly, with his super duper magical surgery, restored her career, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Who is the source of the information about that? Why, it's Patrick O'Reilly. It's his clinic, his hospital that he ran as an osteopath that said, oh yeah, he did this amazing surgery. So when you go back to, oh yeah, he was this amazing surgeon, he's saying that about himself. So it's really a non-starter. But there are a whole bunch of Patrick O'Reilly people. And very quickly, osteopaths, at least in that time, were really considered, they were lower class. They were kind of looked down on by physicians. They were kind of lumped with chiropractors and, other folks. They were in a different part of the medical directories. So they were really considered second-class citizens. There was a real stigma about being an osteopath. So anyway, that's the story on Patrick O'Reilly. He kicks around, he's on these lists again, like the Wikipedia list of suspects. He's in there. Okay. Question over on Instagram. You mentioned a suspect's name that isn't listed on Wikipedia. Yes, this is a good place to end. Instagram, I'm going to have to cut you off in a couple of minutes anyway. The guy's name is Jacob Edward Fisk. Okay. Someone went in years and years and years and years ago to the Wikipedia page on Black Dahlia suspects and put in this guy, Jacob Edward Fisk, who went back in a time machine and killed Elizabeth Short or did something like that. It was a prank on Wikipedia, and it was erased the same day. But what happens is, Wikipedia being Wikipedia, every so often, someone will go back and keep restoring Jacob Edward Fisk. And I make no attempt to edit Wikipedia. I was an early adopter, and I'm fed up with it. But the one thing I will do is take out mentions of Jacob Edward Fisk, because he's a real guy. He was never a suspect. But that's the deal. It was a prank, and people keep restoring his name to Wikipedia for whatever reasons. Okay. It's a prank. Okay. Instagram, I'm going to say goodbye to you so that this video doesn't get eaten. 2 weeks from today, I will be doing a George Hodel Ask Me Anything. And then the next Dahlia thing will be, I think, August 5th. Yes. Okay. All right, Instagram folks, it's been fun, but I have to say goodbye now. Adios. Next time. Okay, YouTube. I am sorry about I don't know what's wrong with the chat. I haven't any idea. I hope it's better for next time. I checked the boxes for live chat and live chat replay. I don't know, but I'll do it. I'll do George Hodel again I'll do George Hodel in 2 weeks, July 15th, 10 a.m. And then I will do a Black Dahlia Ask Me Anything on August 5th. And let's hope that by then, YouTube will have its technical difficulties sorted out. And thank you very much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for George Hodel, and next month for Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. Okay. Have a great month. See you later.